to develop ideas that are founded on a new spirit of potlatch, a spirit in which prosperity is shared by all. This isn't charity. We're not looking for handouts. Rural communities just want an opportunity to participate in the recovery just as fully as we participated in the recession. And we all know how hard this last recession hit rural communities. As Oregon pursues and manages its economic development, we need to challenge our state's political and business leaders to always think beyond the metropolitan area. We need to remind them every day about the other Oregon. The Oregon where timber production still matters, where farming and ranching and fishing still matter, and where new economic sectors need to be encouraged and nurtured. I invite you to think about Oregon, whose political and economic policies embrace the spirit of potlatch. I invite you to think about an Oregon where everyone is invited to the feast. And today, I am honored to be here with you all and to be allowed a few minutes of time today. And it's my honor to next invite Tribal Chief Don Ivy today. Thank you, Chief.
Daisla. Welcome, friends. Greetings, friends. Daisla. It's a Milik word spoken by the native peoples in this Coos Bay region in times past and still today. Daisla. Welcome. But besides a proclamation of welcome, Daisla, as we say it here in this house, it conveys a calling to order, a call to gather as friends, a call to gather as community. And so we do. We gather here today in community. We gather here in recognition that though we may differ in our religious beliefs or our political persuasions or our particular measures of what is prosperity or success, each of us share some common interests. We all need clean air. We all need clean water. And we all need good food. We all need safety and sustenance and shelter. And we all need assurance that if we call for help, help will come. And from those traditions of Daisla and all of that cultural heritage that word carries for us, as the chair mentioned, there is also potlatch that comes from those traditions. And to elaborate on the chair's remarks in its simplest form, and as the Caucus tribe teaches its children, potlatch is to come together. Potlatch is to share with each other and care for each other. It's a celebration called by a host tribe, in this case, the Oregon Coastal Caucus, to reaffirm relations and alliances between and among friends and family, to negotiate new and necessary arrangements and agreements between and among competing interests, to acknowledge the accomplishments since we last met, to make our plans for our next year's endeavors. And two, poignant for today, potlatch is to gather, to acknowledge the passing of those who might have been with us the last time we were together. Memories that will always remain special to us for how they inspired us and how they motivated us. Potlatch dictates that those who prepared the place for our celebration, who prepared our food, prepared our accommodations, be appreciated and thanked as they were earlier. And to that point, though, I want to reiterate My thanks to the Mill Casino staff and to the Oregon Coastal Caucus staff who did all the work that allowed this celebration to occur in this house today. Traditional basket weavers will tell you anywhere in Oregon's Indian country and certainly along Oregon's coast, to make a good basket requires first that you have a good heart, that the materials that you have gathered are the proper ones, and that they've been taken care of in the proper way, including your tools. And that for your basket to be a good one, you must also have a song to sing into it. A song for your people. A song for your family. A song for your community. A song for all the people. Today, and for the work that we have gathered here to do, let us sing that good song. Let us make a good basket. And let us be reminded that the work we are here to do is for all the people. So at this beginning of the 5th Annual Oregon Coastal Caucus Economic Summit, I say to you again, Isla. Welcome, friends. Greetings, friends. Masi, thank you.
Again, a thank you to the Coquille tribe. Let's all give them a hand. So we are in the thriving community of North Bend. So we're going to have our mayor come up and say a couple words. And as he's moving forward, as you move forward to just welcome us here to your community, would all the mayors stand up? Because I want to make sure that people understand who the people are that are here at our conference. And just take a look around at mayors and city council members, actually. So let's say that really intimate group. And it is my privilege to introduce another educator. Rick and I went back and forth 2 different schools. So, and people may know that North Bend and Marshfield have had a rivalry over the years. But I will never forget, he was the teacher of the year for Oregon one time, and so he would give speeches, and he actually came over to Marshfield High School and gave us this rousing speech. And I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever heard when his comment was, hey, teachers, you need to teach with enthusiasm. You need to understand what you're teaching and teach with enthusiasm. And if you don't have it, fake it.
That's the enthusiasm. We can go on. It's difficult to follow 2 eloquent speakers that we've already heard today. And if there's one thing I'm not, it's eloquent. So bear with me. You know, it's my privilege to be here at the Oregon Coastal Economic Summit and invite you to our city. Well, it's kind of our city. I don't know. I don't understand the sovereign part, but you are very near North Bend, Oregon, and we love it here. The temperature today here may get to 70 degrees. I don't need to say anything else, do I? Welcome to North Bend, Coos Bay Area, southern Oregon coast. You are at the gateway to the largest ocean in the world. Doesn't that sound good? Right. We want you to enjoy us while you're here. Do your business, make things better, do what you're here to do, but take a look at the largest ocean in the world. We have beaches. Some of you have beaches, but you don't have our beaches. Golf. Some of you have golf, but you don't have Bandon Dunes and all those wonderful things that school teachers can't afford to go to. And as you entered this city, well, if you came from the north anyway, you crossed Mr. McCullough's favorite bridge. You know, I know a lot of you along the coast have McCullough bridges, but we have the only bridge named the McCullough Bridge I call it the North Bend Bridge. So you're here, and we're so glad you are here. And we want you to realize how much we love it here and how much we want you to love it too. The one thing I didn't mention, and we have the Mill Casino. We joke about the Mill Casino. My friend Tom Yonker, who is a full-blooded, half-blooded something, and we taught together for a lot of years. And people think we don't like each other. I don't know how they're perceptive they can be. But, the Caucus tribe means so much to our area. I mean, say what you want to say. But without the Mill Casino and the Caucus tribe, and they're not they are not just a casino. I mean, if it's just a casino, there's a lot of places that are just casinos. But we have the Mill Casino, which is much more than that. I am a rural boy. I was born in Pendleton, Lutterbuck. Hey, we got some Pendleton guy. Okay. I grew up in Arlington. Grow honkers. Nobody knows about Arlington, do they? I went to Hermiston and finished my education. And then I went to LeGrand for 4 years, and what it used to be called Eastern Oregon College. And and then I came to North Bend Coos Bay. You don't know how hard it is for me to say North Bend Coos Bay. But I'm doing, and Arnie has done so well. We used to beat them so badly all the time. And he has put that behind him. Thank you, Arnie. I appreciate that. Yeah. But I'm a rural boy. And when I was pitching Hermiston vine ripened watermelons, and when I was stacking alfalfa hay, I didn't understand or realize the politics of the situation. I didn't realize that the voice of the rural people is sometimes not heard. I am here to join with all you rural people. There's nothing wrong with the city folks if they want to live there. But I feel at home with rural people. I had to stop twice at a stoplight in North Bend once, and that thrills me. But we're all rural, and we're not often heard. And the only way to be heard is to join together. And that's what this caucus does. I mean, if they could see this room filled with you people who can really make something happen, if they could see that, they would know how powerful the rural people of Oregon are. Abe Lincoln said, oh, by the way, we have great people in this community. We have great people in this community. And if anything ever happens to you during your stay, like if somebody's rude or not polite, Mayor Shoji of Coos Bay and I have this agreement. She handles all complaints on the odd and the even years, and I handle them all the rest of the time. But I don't think you'll run into that. And also, the city of Coos Bay, bless those people. If you have been losing at the tables or at the slots, they will reimburse you. Just send them a note, okay? So, I love Coos Bay. But anyway, Abe Lincoln said, I will get myself ready, and my time will come. Abraham Lincoln said that anyway. I read that in a book. I will get myself ready, and my time will come. Your time is going to come. Our time may be coming. It may be here. Are we getting ourselves ready? That's the key. Locally, we're getting ready. We have the Port of Coos Bay, the SCDC group, the Chamber of Commerce. Everyone is rooting for this community. And that's how we have to succeed, is by joining together. Everyone wants it to happen. Shakespeare said, I didn't teach PE like my friend did, but I taught English. There's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Now, Shakespeare went on to say some other things. If you miss that flood, we cannot afford to miss the flood tide. We cannot. We might even have to make the flood time. But this past weekend, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the rail meets sail. Our railroad system arrived in Coos Bay, North Bend 100 years ago. And the amazing part of that, yeah, let's hear it for the railroad. And I think they're even up to going more than 20 miles an hour on the track, I think. We're getting there. But we have to get ready. Abe Reagan got ready, and we all know Abe's time came. But we have to get ready. The Port of Coos Bay took a shut-down, dilapidated railroad and brought it back to life. And we're 100 years later, we are still with rail service, which no one thought 10 years ago would ever happen. We are getting ready. I hesitate to mention these next three initials, LNG. LNG is a controversial topic, but it has great potential. And whatever somebody else decides, as my citizens call me and say, "What are you doing, Wetherell?" And I go, "Hey, I do not make that decision." But whatever decision's made, that is an opportunity. We not only are preparing physically, we have a gas tax coming up, which I'm sure any of you locals are going to vote for, to improve that all-important word, infrastructure. We have to do that. We have to do that. And I know, and I'm confident, that we will have a gas tax as a beginning point to improve our dilapidated streets and highways. We must get ready. We have a new museum. If you haven't been to the museum, go to the museum. The Caucus Museum is located right on Highway 101. It's phenomenal. It's state of the art. When I first moved here, my brother said, "Oh yeah, entering Coos County, set your clock back 100 years." He thought he was clever. But you know what? We're not. We're ahead now. We're looking at the future. We have boardwalks in both cities now with a dream, as soon as our Coquel brothers and sisters get online, to hook and connect the two boardwalks. We have theaters. The historical Egyptian Theater, which is downtown Coos Bay, has been restored and is in the process. In North Bend, the Liberty Theater
They're arranging the
I know, I'll give it back to you.
Where's she wanting?
No, it's not anywhere we want. This is highly orchestrated.
So while they're sitting down, Senator Cruz has a few statements to make in recognition of one of our fellow senators. Senator Cruz?
Thank you, Senator Cruz, for that. Now, before we begin, I'd like to make sure our guests are seated because we will be broadcasting this live on YouTube and also on demand. And so we have the cameras and the graphics set appropriately. So in the first seat here, if we could have Betsy Johnson. And then next to her, could we have Joanne please come sit? Does it matter which chair? All right, yes, please, Betsy. And then Joanne, would you please come sit next to Betsy, please? Thank you so much. And then we'll have Arnie, Caddy. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. And then Deborah Boone, David Gomberg, and Wayne. Thank you. All right, wonderful. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. And we'll be beginning our broadcast here shortly. Thank you. They're here with a collaborative, collective spirit, trying to lobby together to do what is best for the community in the Oregon legislature, and we are very happy to be part of this. Please allow me to introduce you to our guest panel as we go along. First, we have Betsy Johnson, and then we have our former Senator Joanne Verger. Thank you for being here. Senator Arnie Robland, Representative Caddy McEwen, Senator Jeff Cruz, Representative Deborah Boone, Representative David Gomberg, and Representative Wayne Krieger. Thank you for being here with us. Krieger, pardon me. Krieger. Thank you, and all corrections are welcome. So I also have my charter panel here with me, our government relations team. We will be conducting charter local edition interviews throughout today and tomorrow. And any of you who have an interview today or who would like to have an interview, you can look for our government relations team. Our interviews will be down the hall in room 145. Please just go into the check-in area where you check into your rooms. There's a long hall there, and it will be room 145. So please allow me to introduce you to our government relations team. We have Colleen Dillaway, Marion Jackson, Stephen Gerber, and Kara Troutman. And then in order for us to broadcast and stream this, we have an outstanding production team. I'd like to introduce them as well. We have Dinah Morrison here in the front, Nick Wagner, and then from California, we have Tony Lamania, Bert Carrion, Gerardo Lopez. And we thank them so much for coming and contributing their talents to this event. This is a great privilege for us. And I speak for our entire team when we thank you for this chance to play a more expanded role in this event as Charter Communications. Now, in our live broadcast, we'll have up to 90 minutes to talk. And in order for each person to have their time on camera, to have their graphics displayed properly, and to have equal time, we'll start one at a time and talk for roughly 5 minutes with each panelist. And then Dinah Morrison will have the cue cards here in the front. Yellow indicates you have roughly 30 seconds to wrap up, and the red will indicate that you're basically out of time and it's time to move to our next guest. And then to create more of a robust discussion, once each person has had a chance to speak for about 5 minutes, I'll be asking some more general economic questions to the group. Anyone is welcome to answer, but because the camera will need a chance to get to you, we'll have to make sure we take our turns and speak one at a time. So thank you for taking part in the panel, and we are so grateful to be able to do this and share your ideas. So let's begin with Senator Betsy Johnson from District 16. Betsy, thank you for being here with us. And go ahead and tell us, why is this caucus so important to you?
Well, the Coastal Caucus is bicameral, bipartisan. We are the legislators that have the privilege of representing the coast. At one time, we represented a tenth of the Oregon legislature. I believe, I think without fear of contradiction, that because we operate in a collaborative model, that we bring one of the strongest single voices to the legislature. We will take up topics, and if there is not consensus or overall agreement, we won't move forward. And on those things that we are of one mind, I think we represent a pretty powerful block of opinion. Most of us either chair committees or sit on powerful committees that are making decisions about funding or policy. We are in a position to influence those discussions by virtue of the fact that we are Republican, are Democrat, and our sole focus is on the health and well-being of the Oregon coast. We have initiated a number of projects that I think stand out as accomplishments. Our work on ocean acidification, you'll hear later today, I think was seminal in saving oyster production from British Columbia to Baja. We have spearheaded the acquisition of a dredge. I mentioned this in the conversation with Senator Wyden. That dredge is being used to keep small ports open, and as I said with Senator Wyden, for some of those ports, the ability to dredge the harbor, the facility outside of the federal navigational way, is existential in keeping the boat's ability to come in and out and service the fishing industry. We have championed diseases that have affected our nursery industry, coming together on sudden oak death, which could have been catastrophic if it gets a toehold in our state. We, I think, helped shape the conversation about marine reserves. There were a number of very aggressive proposals that some of us thought overstepped what was an appropriate starting point in that particular issue area. And we were able, through our bipartisan negotiation and collegial relationships, to develop a program that met with acceptance and was adopted by the legislature. Senator Cruz and I, a Republican and a Democrat, North Coast and South Coast, carried that in the House. We are staffed every year by a Sea Grant Fellow from OSU. This is generally a young scientist who has the opportunity to come into the legislature and be exposed to public policy. Occasionally we've lost one, but they always come back. We had one stray off to want to go to law school, and we were able to salvage her, and she's back in the natural resources arena. But the opportunity for the Sea Grant Fellows to work with all of us, broadening their experience to be able to preserve the conversation about natural resources. And I think we'll touch on this again as my time winds down. For all of us, as Senator Wyden said, that are welcoming tourists into our forests, onto our beaches, we have to keep front of mind the fact that many of our constituents still make profitable and honorable living in the natural resource arena. They farm, they ranch, they fish, they log, they run dairies. And as we are beginning to think about welcoming more people into the great outdoors, and my particular worry is this Send Everybody's Kid to Camp initiative that's going to be on the ballot, I want to know who's writing that curriculum, because for all of us, and I think I speak for all of us, making sure that kids learn that natural resource extraction and use is not a bad thing. And I'm quite concerned about how that curricula gets shaped. I don't want kids coming out into the great, magnificent open spaces of Oregon and learn that our constituents are doing bad things. So we are advocates for natural resource economies. We are advocates for the coast. And I think we have formed enduring friendships that have led to trust relationships that allow us to speak in a single voice for the benefit of the magnificent Oregon coast. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that very much. Our next panelist is our former Senator Joanne Berger. Thank you so much for being here, and you have served locally and at the state level, and so you've had experience with both. And now, as a retired contributor, you have a different perspective on that. And now, how has that shaped your ability to serve now?
Well, I do. You've heard a wonderful, articulate description of the Coastal Caucus in 2016. Well, take your calendar and roll it back This was not the Coastal Caucus that we've all started with. This is what has progressed and become a powerful force in the legislature. That doesn't just happen overnight. At one time, the Coastal Caucus was not unified because we are not unified. We do not have the same issues. When people say the Oregon coast, they think that that means we're all singing Kumbaya. Not true. We all have different issues. So in order for what you have just heard to take place, took a lot of smart people working collaboratively with goals in mind and determined to succeed for you. So let's look at what it was. It was primarily focused on the fishing community and industry. Representative Wayne Krieger had a lot to do with holding that small group together that started. People floated in and floated out. Some interested, some not too interested, depended on the agenda. Sometimes the agenda was repetitive. But at some point, everyone realized the coastal voice is not being heard. And unless we change, unless we do something that makes us look like we have a constituency that is in dire need, we have ports all up and down. We have all of these issues, not just limited to fishing, but to our communities. We've got to do something. And so we began to talk about what kind of rules are we going to have. We're going to build on consensus. If you bring a bill to the Coastal Caucus, you need every vote. That's consensus. If someone disagrees, they may support your bill, but of the Coastal Caucus. And so bills were more thoughtful. Also, it was a goal-oriented process that they wanted bicameral and bipartisan now. Remember, we're all at the table. We've got House members, we've got Republicans, we've got Democrats. We even had one legislator, because of the issues with water from Klamath Falls, that joined our group and participated in the conversation. As time went on, we needed to get to be more informed about exactly what was happening with some of the agencies. If we were going to be able to move forward in the legislative process, we had to know what were our challenges, who were the people we were going to be dealing with, and so then we began to have guests to come in and talk to the Coastal Caucus. I want to say about marine reserves, this was a highly emotional, fractious kind of subject that came up. And the Coastal Caucus, with the help of others, obviously, hired a young woman who went from person to person, who was very, very opposed to what was happening, and was able through weeks and months of negotiation to work out what ended up to be at least a more satisfactory and program that was able to move forward. And so what I hope that you realize in looking at the group of people that are on this stage is that they've done what you want to happen in Washington, D.C. They have been able to agree, to be respectful when they disagreed, and to be able to move forward with this kind of organization that represents you in the Oregon legislature.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Next, we have Senator Arnie Roblin, and we'd like to thank you for being here, and also please tell us what your dream goals are to come out of this year's caucus efforts.
Yeah, this whole conference came because I was a part of the Coastal Caucus. I happened to be co-speaker at one time and worked with a Roseburg other co-speaker, Mr. Hanna, and I had an opportunity to go to an economic summit at UCLA. And I came back and brought this plan and said to my staff, Rosie Shacken, look it over. You went to UCLA. See if this is a worthwhile thing. She looked it over and she said, we have to do something like this. And so we went to the Coastal Caucus and said, with your help, I think we can put on a conference that can start having a conversation, a deeper conversation, in putting together our local governing people, from mayors to county commissioners to others, with state agencies, and start having a conversation on the coast. Them coming to us rather than us going to them. And we had found out when I was a high school principal here that it's about halfway in Oregon if I go to Portland as opposed to if they come to here. So the road is a lot shorter from Coos Bay to Portland than it is from Portland to Coos Bay. And it seemed like a really great idea to have people come here and actually see, taste, understand what we are all about. And I think it's the 5 years ago, the start has really proven to be a really true opportunity for people to really mix in an environment where we're at home base, whether it's here or up and down the coast, and they're coming to us, and they're getting to see, hear, and talk to people. And I think it continues to grow and has been a really exceptional thing. My district goes from the Charleston Bridge to 3rd Street in Tillamook and all the west side, Oceanside, and all the west side of Tillamook Bay, and then over into the valley in Sheridan and Falls City, parts of 7 counties. And so as you walk and talk and work with people, you start to realize that, all of us have very similar goals. I was in Sheridan last week talking with the mayor, and I realized that the issue that is a big one on the coast right now, I don't know if many of you know about FEMA and their insurance rates and what is now considered habitat for salmon, which takes up most of downtown Coos Bay, and the restrictions they're putting on that land. It's a major issue for the coast. I didn't realize that in Sheridan, Oregon, they lose all of their developable land to that same plant because they have a little creek that runs through it. And that creek, in a 100-year flood, would flood all of the land that they have currently set aside for their industrial growth. We have common issues in the whole coast, north and south. And in order to have a voice, you have to come together. During the last time we did redistricting, one of the things that the Coastal Caucus said clearly was we needed to keep 3 senators and 6 House members in the Coastal Caucus in that redistricting, because there are enough people, if we take the whole coast, to make 1 Senate district, because it's all up by population. And so we'll hear from Senator Cruz, who has a lot more of the valley than some of the rest of us. Senator Johnson goes all the way to Portland. And so we had to grow because the population of the coast has not grown as fast as some of the other places. That's the power of having a Coastal Caucus who sits together, talks together, thinks together, and works together on a lot of different issues. I actually got involved with another group called PNWA, Pacific Northwest Economic Region, and you'll hear from one of the past president who's here from Idaho, and realize that there's some other issues that are really big, and it's the Coastal Caucus idea, the same thing with PNWA, which is the 5 western states and the 5 western provinces of Canada working together to talk about common issues. One of those is the quagga and zebra mussels. You haven't seen many here because there's only one place in all of North America that doesn't have them, and that's the Pacific Northwest region. Everywhere else has them. If they invade our area, it will cost us $500 million a year just to maintain the working systems that we have. It's those kinds of issues that are really big that are coming at us that as a group, we have a chance to solve. And I look forward, there's a lot of people who are here that are also on that PNWA group. So my vision is that we continue to do the things that our constituents want us to do, and that is work together, find common sense solutions for complex problems, and move forward. Our fishing industry has more sustainable seafoods than any place else in the world. Our pink shrimp, all because we have inventive people on the coast who make nets, who think about it, and make a difference for regular Oregonians, our fishing fleet, forestry. People need to understand that we really do think long and hard about all the issues that other people think that we're just lawyers. We aren't. We are progressive people who want to make this place work for all of us. And I thank you for the opportunity to say a few words to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Representative Caddy McEwen from District 9, and you've had the pleasure of growing up in these beautiful places and then moving on to serve the people you know and love so well in Salem. And how has that been your way to serve? So many people are transplants and come here later in life and serve that way.
Oh, thank you, Dana. Well, first of all, we welcome transplants of any stripe, so please come to the coast. We appreciate that very, very much. When that question was posed, I thought about it for a couple of days, and I did have the great good fortune of growing up in this beautiful community. Did my parents and my grandparents go back about 4 generations here, and I think the pertinent factor that I consider is what we have been and what we can become. We have been in the past a very robust economy and a very healthy community where we didn't suffer the slings and arrows of poverty, that we weren't, of the 36 counties, one of the bottom 3 in all of the things that you don't want on the front page, which are a 2-year shorter lifespan, higher smoking and obesity rates. We have higher abuse rates. We have a lot of things that are stemming from the poverty that we experience here because we've been in a recession for 35 years, not a decade like a lot of our communities. And our metro area has had the privilege of moving forward out of the recession that we all have experienced. We're far behind in that regard. We're getting better, but we're not there. And I think all of us who represent coastal communities come with a little different eye because of that. When I was the chair of the school board and had the great privilege of working with Senator Roblin as the principal at our high school, when a few decades ago we had a couple thousand kids in our high school, and many of you already know this. We're down to about 800. And that's the case all along this part of the coast, and it's because our population is the same. It hasn't changed in the number, but the demographic has changed dramatically because we're older, because those family wage jobs have left. So I think we see this from a little different perspective than some of our colleagues, with great respect, that we have a long way to go to become a healthy economy again. I feel very privileged to sit with this group of esteemed leaders on this stage. When I became a member of the Coastal Caucus, when I walked into the Capitol in January of 2013, I was curious about what this organization was all about. We have a great deal of experience on this panel. We have people who are seasoned, who understand coastal issues. And I'll tell you, when we meet every Thursday morning at 7 o'clock, with a mission of trying to figure out ways that we can collectively come together as a group and support the issues that are existential to our coast to make us healthy and to make us vibrant, it's a remarkable thing. It truly, truly is. People check their politics at the door. We have robust, raucous discussions. We are able to bring people in to educate us on issues. We all take that charge very, very seriously, and as Senator Verger and Senator Johnson alluded to, if we don't come out with a clear consensus, we move along. But when we do come up to something that we feel is important, we get behind it and we push hard. There are issues on the coast that I think we all are finding important coming into the next session. I'm privileged to be co-chairing the Joint Commission on Transportation, Preservation and Modernization on the coast. Our infrastructure issues are similar in some ways to others, but we have an additional layer of transportation infrastructure issues that a lot of our colleagues don't. We have ports. We have transit issues, I think that was alluded to earlier, that are different than the metro area, but they do exist. We have pathway issues. You heard someone mention, I think, bringing the pathway together from the north and the south end of the bay here, connecting in the center. So those issues are common to us, but are done in a little bit different way. We have elder care issues, just like everybody else, but right now we have some serious issues around memory care on the coast. It seems to be, for 3 of our districts, emerging as something that we really are going to have some conversations about as we go into this next session. In the last session, we passed a bill forming a shellfish task force. We all came together and decided that this industry is important enough to all of us that we have a task force operating right now that I'm privileged to chair. Senator Johnson is working with me on this, and we're going to bring an initiative bill in the next session trying to deal with funding for the ocean acidification work that we need to do, and looking at water quality issues around shellfish, looking at certification of ground for shellfish production? What are the best management practices around shellfish production that are very specific to the coastal communities? This is an enormous industry, but it has room to grow. How can we help them grow? So I'm delighted to be here today and share the stage with my esteemed colleagues, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation. And thank you all for coming to my district. Welcome to House District 9.
Thank you so much. And Senator Jeff Cruz from District 1, your district is different. You're a farmer. You're a business owner. How do you adjust and meet what your community needs, which can be quite different than what's needed on the coast?
Well, actually, Dana, it's not all that different. I do live in Roseburg. I think, outside of Senator Whitsett, the only member of the Coastal Caucus who does not live on the coast. I'm definitely the only person who's been chair of the Coastal Caucus that doesn't live on the coast. But if you go to most of Southern Oregon is natural resource based, and that's the bread and butter by which we all live. So, and actually we have, as a caucus, talked about expanding on some issues out to other rural legislators to make our voice stronger. And I think that's something we are probably going to get a little more serious about in the 17th session. As far as my ability to know what's going on the coast, I think I've done pretty good. When I was chair of the Coastal Caucus is when we did pass the Marine Reserve Bill and when we passed the legislation on port dredging. And I don't want to spend just a minute on that because we're not done with that work yet. Because we made a commitment when we bought the one portable dredge that we needed two, and so that will be an ask in the next session to make sure we get that second dredge because one cannot handle the whole coast. We know that. But what was actually wonderful about that process was that we got all parties to work together. And I'm talking about state agencies, the executive branch, the legislative branch, Congress, and federal agencies. And the result was, I think, very gratifying for all of us. And you know, and the issue was incredibly dire because without the efforts that we did, including making sure that we stayed on the Corps of Engineers schedule for channel dredging, a lot of our small ports would be in serious trouble right now. So, we as a group were able to push that and get that to happen, and I think it's one of the best successes we've had as a group. There's a lot more work to do. Representative McCune's been the chair of the Coastal Caucus for the last 2 years and has done a marvelous job. And I don't know what I did wrong, but for some reason they've decided I'll be chair for the next 2 years again. And quite honestly, part of the reason for that, because we alternate back and forth between House and Senate every 2 years, it's the way we've always operated, but part of the reason for that is economic development. And the key to economic development for a lot of the coast and actually a lot of Southern Oregon is the Port of Coos Bay. And that is going to be a focus. In normal circumstances, Senator Roblin would have probably been the one to be the chair of the Coastal Caucus this next go-around, but because we're going to have so much focus on that, and he's from here, we thought that would appear self-serving, so we didn't want to do that. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You know, perception is a whole lot of what we do here. But, we have a vision for Southern Oregon, and the vision for Southern Oregon is we have a very robust port to export products from, okay? It's a key to all of this. LNG's number one. And I know there's some people who don't like that. I have been a supporter and will continue to be a supporter, and it is the key to a whole lot of things that we can make happen economically in Southern Oregon. And it's true, Washington County may have come out of the recession. We have not, okay? And it's going to be our job to expand our network enough to get enough people in the Legislative Assembly to understand that there is an Oregon outside of the Willamette Valley, and we are important too. And it comes down to natural resources and our ability to utilize them. And, you know, I was happy to hear the Caucus are still interested in the Coosa Bay Wagon Road land. I think giving that to them would be a wonderful thing, because guess what? They'd cut trees. It would be a wonderful thing. So economic development, I think, is going to be what drives us for the next couple of years, and hopefully we can find ways to be successful.
Thank you, Senator. And next we have Representative Deborah Boone from District 32. And Deborah, tell us what makes your community unique and what you'd like to do for the people you serve most this year at this caucus and in the state legislature.
Okay, I think I was the only one who didn't get the question before this. So I think my district, of course, I like to tell everybody I represent the beautiful upper left coast of Oregon, and the very best district that we have.
Except for Senate District 1, but okay.
Okay. But my district is unique in that it's a beautiful part of the coast, and then the Coast Range, the mountains, and in my district and with Senator Johnson and Representative Witt on the other end, we have the most of the Oregon State Forest in our district. So we have a lot of trees, probably more trees and animals than we do people, but that's changing too. So our district is the playground for Portland and the rest of the state, and also in Washington State. And we actually have a legislator from Washington State, one of my colleagues on Pacific Fisheries Task Force too, Representative Brian Blake over in the corner there. And welcome to the summit. But my district is unique in that we have everybody and everything represented there. I have young and old. A lot of people retire there. A lot of people come and, like I said, come and play there. We have viewpoints on issues all over the map. I like to look at it that it's a full spectrum I represent, and I'm constantly reminding people on both ends of this spectrum. Maybe you don't agree with this person, but that's the way it is. I represent everyone. I try to be fair. Our Coastal Caucus, we've been talking about how it operates, and one of the great things about the Coastal Caucus is that we do also represent all ends of the spectrum too, and in a lot of cases, issues that are very important to one of us or more, maybe two or more of us, aren't so important to the rest of us, but we try to be fair with each other, and if something's a big deal to Representative Gomberg, and not such a big deal to me, but if it has to do with kites, he's going to be the king there. I'll probably go along with it. It's not going to hurt my district. We have kites up there too. So we've been very helpful to each other in getting our legislation passed. And as Senator Johnson said, we're about 1/10 of the legislature, and that makes us kind of a strong voice. And one of the issues that I think is very important in my district is somewhat unique along the whole coast is the upcoming, impending big Cascadia event. And I've been doing a lot of work on emergency preparedness for the whole time I'm in the legislature. And one of the things that started this all out was the seafloor mapping. And I'd like to thank Senator Verger, and at the time helped us get a big chunk of money to do a big chunk of that mapping job. It was being done 5% at a time, and it's very useful for tsunami modeling, et cetera. So it was important at the beginning of our work on preparedness, so we knew what tsunami modeling would be, and we were able to get up to, I think it's a little over 50% now of mapping, so that's a big deal. The other thing that we've been able to do, and this caucus was very instrumental in helping, was getting a resilience policy advisor or officer in the governor's office. And so it's a real person who's one point person to advise the governor on all things resilient. And we have a fabulous person doing it, Mike Harriman, and I hope I got his name right. He is almost too good to be true, but he really is very well qualified for that, and I'm looking forward to working more, getting the resilience plan that we've got passed a few years ago implemented piece by piece. And Elizabeth out here had a big piece of that, a role that Portland played in that as far as funding for resilience and seismic upgrades for historic buildings and buildings in the inland. I'm watching that very carefully too, by the way, so it's making me nervous. But so, I mean, there's a lot more to be said, and somebody mentioned early on the importance of veterans, and I have a lot of veterans in my district too, and they're very important to me. It's the one human piece of my work that I cry a lot over. So I'm very interested in working with our federal delegation on getting our services to veterans. We have 330,000 veterans in Oregon, and only 10% of them are availing themselves of the services that they've earned. So that's a high point for me. So I will quit now so that I can end like Senator Roeblen, right on the money.
You're a keeper. Thank you so very much. And now we turn to Representative David Gomberg in District 10. And let's see if we can talk about transportation, the things you're excited about in your district, and then the legislation that you plan to bring to the floor in the upcoming session, please.
Absolutely. And I want to thank Representative Boone for already indicating her support for my comprehensive statewide kite flying plan for next year. You know, I look at this room, and I've described the Oregon Summit as the most influential room in Oregon for these 2 days. We've got neighborhood advocates and business owners. We've got city council and mayors. We've got county leadership, statewide officials, agency heads, and our national delegation here as well, all focused on issues affecting the coast. You know, and so often we talk about this urban-rural divide, and so often when I hear that phrase, what I'm hearing is the Willamette Valley in eastern Oregon, and perhaps leaving out the coastal concerns, which are absolutely unique. A year ago, we were here talking about something very important to the Central Coast, the future of the Coast Guard Air Station in Newport. And I hope that Senator Wyden is still in the room so I can say thank you for his leadership and the work that our national delegation did working together to save that resource, because it saves lives each and every day. And this week, there was some interesting economic news. I think perhaps the most significant economic news of this decade, or perhaps for decades to come. And I wanted to give a shout out to President Ed Ray of Oregon State University, who announced this week that he was going to locate the Marine Science Initiative at the Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport. Now, this is not just about the simple fact that if you want to study the ocean, you should do that near the water. But imagine there's a near the water. What will be ramifications for the future of our industries? New transportation, schools, people that want to move here, people that want to live here, people that want to move away and sell their property. What would be the ramifications if Oregon State said that it's simply too dangerous? This institution had the opportunity to lead or to lead the retreat. And what they said is that we're going to put up a structure that is designed to withstand the impacts that we expect will come. We're going to look to the future. We're not going to look to running away. And we're going to set an example, state of the art, state of the science, state of the engineering, so that coastal communities throughout Oregon and throughout the Northwest can look to this example of how good things can happen. And there are wonderful things happening around Yaquina Bay right now. I represent from Yachats to Tillamook and inland to Sheridan and Falls City as well. And I look around Yaquina Bay right now where things are happening like the Marine Science Initiative, which is well on its way to creating the preeminent institution of ocean science, not just on the Northwest, not just in the United States, but around the world. That's going on. At the same time, Bud Shoemake in Toledo this week took delivery of 40 containers, and he's out there this week with a giant monkey wrench putting together the biggest boat lift between Seattle and San Francisco. We've got the new OMSI camp. We've got NOAA. We've got Rogue Brewery. And this October, we'll be cutting the ribbon on opening, at long, long last, the improvements to Highway 20 leading between Corvallis and Newport. Good things going on. And how do good things like that happen? They happen when people work together. A fascinating article in Governing Magazine very recently that talked about the example of Lincoln County and how when there are challenges and problems that people pick up the phone and they work together. Industry, government, county, statewide, and federal, collaborating to find solutions. It was so pleasing to me to see an article in a national magazine talking about this local example of how people can solve problems. And I hope that you look up that magazine and take a look at what's going on there. Dana, you asked a question about me and my unique concerns and my unique experiences. I'm a small business guy. My wife and I own a small business. We bring a unique perspective to the Capitol, and particularly to the Democratic Caucus, when you depend on the transportation system to bring you business, when you depend on containers to bring your product to you, when you're out there trying to manage employees, trying to find employees. That's a unique perspective that we bring, but I think working together, we can find solutions to those problems. That's a big part of what the Coastal Caucus is all about. It's a big part of what this conference is all about. So I'm also very pleased that all of you are here to work together and look to identifying those common problems and finding common solutions to them.
Thank you so much. And finally, our representative, Wayne Krieger. Thank you so much for being here, and your colleagues have spoken about what you've done, your service in the past. Tell us your greatest accomplishments and then what you're hoping to accomplish this year.
Well, I guess living to 76 years old is a starter. I want to say mainly that the reason the Coastal Caucus is as successful as it is, you've seen that these people are all genuinely concerned for each other's districts and the people. That's the key to it. We are generally concerned. I want to talk just about a couple things we have done. John Griffith, our county commissioner that we lost some years ago, worked with me during my freshman year, 2001, on 3534, which is the Marine Reserve Bill. We ended up with Dash 23s, trying to get that thing into a form that we felt the governor would, in fact, pass, and he did do that. That's meant a lot to us on the coast, or the whole coast could have been locked up. And the issue around marine sanctuaries, the federal program, if that doesn't scare you, you don't know all what's involved in that. A couple other little issues. The Salmon Research Center, the Oregon Salmon Research Center, you heard just a brief comment about. Dr. Noakes is here with us. And the question as to what hatchery management practices or physical conditions take place in the hatchery that make hatchery fish inferior to wild fish. You can argue whether they are or aren't. We were able to pass a bill to change that board, get a better representation, to move forward, and actually the research center, Dr. Noakes, and the new board have got 7 hatchery research projects in line to help answer that question. And that's going to be a huge economic driver if we can find a way to raise hatchery fish that are more compatible with wild fish. I believe we can do it, and it's just a matter of making those investments in the future. One of the things that my freshman year, got $1 million for the SWAT campus in Brookings. And I called up Steve Credibaugh at 1 a.m. in the morning. Steve, we got it. He says, well, who's this? I said, it's Wayne. We got the money for the SWAT campus in Brookings. Well, it was another 2005, I think another $2.3 million, another $400,000 before I got that thing put together, and a lot of money that SWAT came up with themselves. It's a great opportunity for the people in the South Coast. Nursing program, a lot of single moms who've been able to take advantage of that and become a nurse and not work for $10 an hour. And we really appreciate the fact that the Coastal Caucus was there to help make that happen. On the Salmon Research Center, you know, it's okay to have the center, but you've got to have the funding. So this Republican was going to raise taxes, raise fees. Oh my gracious, they were just all excited. But when we got done, we were able to convince the constituent base who's going to pay that it was an investment that they were willing to make. About $20 is what it's going to cost the average angler over a 10-year period. That's going to provide $1.2 million a biennium for research so we can better understand fish. And Dr. Noakes is going to be a big part of that. I just spoke to him again today. We've got some other things we want to do. Senator Roblin's freshman year, he wanted something to do with the North Bend Airport. And we brought that forward. Senator Berger carried it in the Senate, got it over to the House, had a few glitches. But we got it done because it was more important to the district and the people of Coos County, Curry County. And so we worked for what was best for everybody. And now you've got a wonderful airport here. I'm all done. I'm all done in that I'm not running again. It's been 16 years. It's time to go home to my trees and cows, and that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Thank you for the panelists. Everyone has had a chance to speak. I appreciate that very much. I believe our topics were wide and varied. I've prepared a few general economic questions now. Anyone is welcome to answer, but we'll try to do our best to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, but we'll do it one at a time, please, so our camera crew will have a chance to get to you. So my first question is the Department of Environmental Quality, the benefits this agency has brought to your communities and the challenges.
Well, I'll take a shot at this one.
Look out.
I'm going to start with, first of all, a kind word for Palmer Mason, who's leaning against the wall, and I know Pete Shepard is here. In fact, he's standing right next to him. I think that they get it. They understand that they are running a regulatory agency that has the ability to have a profound effect, positive and negative. And that doesn't mean that I haven't had some pretty robust discussions with those two gentlemen, but I come away with the impression that they are smart, they understand, and they're sympathetic. That's the good news. The bad news is the challenge that I think we all face. DEQ, after I don't know how many years, the Clean Water Act changed, Palmer, in 2011, finally decided that they were going to take a look at effluent discharge from seafood processing facilities. And the original plan was laid out in a way that it was all driven by the agency. It was top down. It was doing it to the fishing community, not with the fishing community. And how those new rules were implemented and rolled out would make an enormous difference economically. And I'll leave it to Senator Cruz to comment on the Brookings facility. But in Warrenton, that Representative Boone and I represent, there was a long-time fish processing plant. It had been there since 1941. An accidental fire burned it right to the ground. At full employment in the height of the season, that processing plant employed 250 people. They were ready to rebuild, the company that owned the plant, and they went to DEQ and said, what are the rules? And this was not on Mr. Shepard's watch, but the answer that they got was, you build it and we'll tell you whether or not you hit the mark. Well, $25 million in capital is not going to take that kind of a risk. And so under Mr. Shepard's, Director Shepard's guidance, we now have initiated a process that has a person assigned to go out and visit with the processors and try to figure out how are we able to sustain this incredibly valuable industry that takes care of processing seafood up and down the coast. But I think that the example that I have just given lays out the dilemma. They are charged with certain regulatory functions under federal law that they have to comply with. I think they're a little too aggressive in their own rule promulgation. They are trying to comply with federal requirements. Nobody in Oregon gets up in the morning and says, gee, I'd like to live in a place where there's crappy air and bad water and befouled soil. I think we need to find that sweet spot where we can all work together, and the heavy hand or potential heavy hand of a regulatory agency does not strangle jobs and opportunity, particularly in fragile economies. And I would leave it to Senator Cruz to comment on his fish processing plant that is just about to cut the ribbon. But I think there's a very delicate balance there, and part of our collective job here as sort of watchdogs of the agency is to never be shy about picking up the phone and screaming like mashed cats if we think that there is agency overreach that is damaging the jobs and economic well-being of our constituents.
If I could follow on that. I don't want to pick just on DEQ because there's other state agencies that tend to be overreaching as well. But we, the plant in Brookings, it's a very small community, not of the scope you're talking about, Betsy, but that plant will employ 50 people, and it's good family wage jobs. And in a community that size, that is massively significant. But we were dealing with the same issues as far as you build it, and then we'll tell you if it works, sort of thing. And quite honestly, I think what I'd like to see from a lot of state agencies is some pushback from the feds when the feds are requiring things that are stupid. And the feds do that a lot. So, but what this is a very good example of our ability here to communicate and work with people to get them to maybe soften the approach they're taking. We did the same thing with the port dredging thing, getting unified permitting processes and things like that, so that a port doesn't have to jump through 8 different processes to do one thing. And we will continue to push because, quite honestly, I get frustrated by a lot of state agencies, but quite honestly, I'm not nearly as frustrated by state agencies as I am by federal agencies, because a lot of the rules that they come up with have no idea. There are people back in Washington, D.C. that don't even know there is a West Coast to this country. So, what they deal with in the Atlantic seaboard is totally different than what we deal with here. And for us to be kind of bunched in with them doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we will continue to push back and try to make people more reasonable than maybe they want to be on their own. And quite honestly, with a lot of the state agencies, they're looking at the big dog in D.C. and trying to comply with them when they should be talking to us first, and we will continue to try to get them to talk to us first.
Kudos to DEQ, though. Last week they issued a permit on an expedited basis, and a whole bunch of people were moving dirt and getting paychecks as a result of their moving at the speed of business, not at the speed of bureaucracy. So in front of 500 people, thanks DEQ for getting the hustle on that permit.
There was a bill a couple sessions ago, I guess it was not last session before, that had to do with how do we help low-income people deal with septic systems that are failing, especially on our coastal lakes. That was the issue for me. We're having blue-green algae in almost all the lakes now, and a lot of it has to do with nitrogen load, which comes from failing septic tanks. We know that we have about 6,000 a year that fail, and the department worked on a bill, had no success. We had a hearing, so we had some success the first year. I decided that I would take it up this last year with some help from other people and work with my Republican colleagues to say, this is really important. And a number of them came on board and said, yes, it really is important. It's not just you. Central Oregon has this problem. All of Oregon has a problem with septics. And how do we deal with them? How do we make sure that people can afford it? We have places where the mobile home they're living in is less expensive than the new septic system they'd have to put in. And how do they afford that? And how do we get it fixed? Because it is a common good to get that fixed. So we were able to pass that bill. We do have a low-cost form. DEQ is in the process of doing an RFQ, or however they're going to do it, to send it out to have a private company run the loan program. It's going a little slower than I had hoped, but it's on its track. We put out about $250,000, which is about 10 systems. Not enough money. So we're going to continue to work on trying to figure out how do we get federal money and private money and others to solve a really big problem that we are now involved with. And we have to do something. We can't let these septic systems continue to degrade and degrade our water and other kinds of things. I appreciate DEQ's work. We did a few town halls on it up and down the coast, and DEQ was there to help us with that. So I agree. They're an agency if you work with. Sometimes it's frustrating. There was an issue when I first came into the state that Senator Verger had been working on for years up in the north part of my district that had to do with a landowner that was trying to get their land fixed up so that they could actually build something on it. It was an old service station that had been there for a long time, had its own problems. And we got together in a room and had everybody work. Thank you, Palmer, for all the effort you put into it. They had another piece of property that was also in Eugene, and they wanted to couple it all together. It was a lot of time was spent by Rosie and I and others to make that happen, but we got it done. I mean, we figured out a way to move forward so that new business could take that prospect, they could sell the property, and it could be used. And I really appreciate the efforts that you do. I hope that we will continue to be, it is a regulatory agency. That's part of their job. That people don't like to hear that all the time, but that is what we ask them to do because we do want clean water and stuff. I hope that we will continue to develop the relationships that say before they have to do something, they talk to us and they work with us, and that we can try to work with them and our constituents, because that's how government works best. And I appreciate Pete coming in and taking over. Appreciate Palmer and all the work that he's done. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. I'll be very brief. But there's another issue that's come up. Senator Roblin and I sat on a task force a couple of years ago, and it has to do with just an innocuous rule that probably no one has thought about, but it has to do with ballast water exchange. We all think it's really critical and important that we protect our coastal waters, whether they're freshwater or saltwater, when vessels come into our bays and they discharge ballast water. So a task force came together that represented the agencies, the shipping industry, the business community. We had legislative, Arnie and I represented the legislature, and worked really hard to come together with an agreement on moving forward the techniques that are used to protect our coastal waters having to do with ballast water. And in the rulemaking process recently, a lot of the players have changed, to be perfectly honest. The representatives on that task force are not the same. The port representatives are different. The business industry representatives are different. And Palmer's done a wonderful job of shepherding through a rulemaking process that all of a sudden raised some red flags in the industry, I think partially because we have new players at the table, and partially because there's a question of whether it went just a step a little bit too far and got the state of Oregon regulation out ahead of our neighboring states and possibly federal legislation that will be coming down soon that's going to create a national benchmark for ballast water exchange. Who would have thought? But Palmer and his office have been wonderful about reaching out. We will be bringing a group of folks together to have a conversation about this, to try and work through it again, so that we are doing the work that we need to do and they need to do as a regulatory agency in protecting our coastal waters, but also not disadvantaging the shipping industry and getting out just a little bit too far. So I appreciate the work that they are willing to do in sitting down and working with us. I think they've done a great job of communicating. And that's just one other example of kind of the push and pull that goes on in passing legislation and the rulemaking that goes into it, and at the end of the day, how good work comes out of all of that.
Thank you so much. And while we're on the topic of the environment and trying to survive in today's economy, the changing oceanic conditions, how is that affecting your community, and what collaboratively can you do about it to maintain the fishing industry and the environment?
Yeah, I'll start. We formed, and again, Coastal Caucus was instrumental when we were doing all the stuff on the reserves. One of the little bills that came out later was the development of a group called the Oregon Trust, Ocean Trust, where we're trying to raise money so that we can start answering some of those specific questions about ocean health. In that group, we convened 20 of the top ocean scientists of Oregon to a Newport meeting and had them have a conversation about where is that canary? What do we need to be looking for to predict what's going to happen next? And a lot of great conversation. We'll have a paper out about that pretty soon, and we're starting to look at how do we now deal with ocean acidification is kind of the big one. And we have some of our oyster producers here, and in particular, the Whiskey Creek hatchery, where most of the private stock of oysters are produced for the West Coast. What we found is that we have this acidic water, and the reason that our coast is so abundant in life most of the time is because we have this underwater current that comes from Japan all the way across the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Very old water, 30 years old as it comes across, and then it upwells when we get the summer winds that blow the water. It sucks up this nutrient-rich water from the bottom of the ocean. And what happened is we found out it's pretty acidic. And in fact, it was so acidic back in 2007, 8, and 9 that in the hatcheries, the water was not usable for producing these deals because before they could form a shell, the acidic water took it away. Calcium carbonate and water and acidic water is not a really good thing. So they were having a hard time. We've kind of come up with some equipment. We've got some great scientists. They worked out some things to make that workable. And then we started looking up and down the coast. Coos Bay doesn't have an ocean acidification problem. We don't know exactly why. It would really be helpful if we knew, so that maybe we could do something about it in the future. We've also had the same issues going over and over again. We're getting the science. We're trying to figure out the ways to make that work, and we will continue.
I just want to add, we heard earlier from Representative Gomberg about Oregon State's buildup of their marine science program, and they're going to add hopefully 500 students to this program. So with 500 students, there's a lot of opportunity for research, and I think since there's so basically little known about the ocean, and that's what we're going to need. And so I'm very much looking forward to that. And we like to call it the Hui of the West. So for those of you in oceanography, that's a Woods Hole.
I would just add that it was the flexibility of Oregon State University and the fact that the legislature, through the governor's office, had some flexible money that we were actually able to respond at Whiskey Creek. They had gone from literally billions of larvae in production to zero. And under Governor Kulongowski's watch, that we were able to appropriate some money. OSU discharged young scientists who came, figured out what the problem was, built the model, and then were able to scale it and export it. But having that flexible money available to the legislature through the Oregon Business Development Department, Biz Oregon, and powerhouse research universities like OSU able to dispatch folks expeditiously made all the difference in Whiskey Creek's survival. And I think Mark's going to be on a panel, and you'll hear more about that later.
And I don't believe that we can underemphasize the role of the Marine Science Initiative in terms of the future of all of these ocean issues. Deb, 500 students, that's going to have an impact on all the help wanted signs on the Central Coast. But that being said, if you're interested in acidification or oxygen levels or ocean warming or rising ocean levels, you're interested in the future of our seafood industry, the work that's going to be done at the Marine Science Initiative and the Hatfield Marine Science Center is absolutely critical to all of those questions, not just for us, but for everybody else around the Pacific Rim. It's a remarkable, remarkable facility, and the new director, Jack Barth, is here with us today. Congratulations on your appointment. We're looking forward to you solving all these problems for us.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much. And then for our viewers at home, we touched on the dredge and that you have plans to get the second dredge. For those that aren't that familiar with it, would someone please describe the importance of dredging, how they work, and why we need a second?
Well, it's quite simply a matter of if you put a boat in water, okay, some of the boat goes underneath the surface of the water, okay? If there's not enough room in the water for that boat to go under the surface of the water, it becomes a permanent monument. So to a large degree, that is what our focus is. With the Corporate Channel dredging to make sure they can get that far, but then you get into the basins, and if you don't have enough depth, you can't dock, you can't even launch. So that's the purpose of the portables, is to make sure that the boat basins themselves remain viable, and they're key to the economy of the coast.
Thank you, Caddy. And then what cost will it to get our...
Well, I thought we have about 3 ports in Oregon and half of them along the coast. Historically, the federal government paid for dredging. And we were very, very fortunate to have a congressional delegation that understood this and went to bat for us year after year after year, and brought us enough money to bring in the Aquina and the Essayons, which are our federal dredges, and do our river mouths on a regular basis. But all of that had to do with earmarks, and it had to do with money from what is called Harbor Maintenance Trust. And every commercial vessel that comes into the U.S. pays a tax, goes into the Harbor Maintenance Trust, and that money is set aside to do jetty repair, infrastructure, and dredging. That money was locked up, 10 years ago or so, and it was very difficult to access, even though that's what it was set aside to do. And earmarks went away. And when earmarks went away and the Harbor Maintenance Trust money was not accessible, all of a sudden, we didn't have the resources to get our waterways dredged. It's never been the responsibility of the states to do dredging. It's always been a federal responsibility. But our larger ports, Coos Bay and Portland, Newport, to some degree, are large enough that they could garner that federal appropriation for dredging, but our small, shallow draft ports were zeroed out in the Corps of Engineers budget, so they had no money available. Representative DeFazio, at a meeting down in Brookings about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and a number of us were in the room, started having a conversation with the small ports about how we can assist with that. And out of that came a process that we were all involved in, working with the governor's office and the legislature to garner a pot of money to see if we could do something to assist because of that lack of money. So we were able to cobble together a pot of money, purchase a portable dredge, and I have to give a shout out to Laura Hagen. Mm-hmm. Laura was our Sea Grant Fellow at the time, working with Senator Cruz when he was the chair of the Coastal Caucus. She did a lion's share of the work in doing the research on what size dredge, how big a dredge, how many cubic yards does it need to move, what ancillary equipment do you need to have to do that. She drove a lot of that. So the dredge, which is now operating in Southern Oregon, is named the Laura in honor of Laura Hagen. And I don't know any other Sea Grant Fellow who has the privilege of having a dredge named after her.
Although there will be a second dredge, so who knows?
But she earned it. So Sea Grant Fellows, beware. But it's just existential. It's really important, and we're just pleased that we could come together as a state with support from our federal delegation to move this forward. And now it's time to move up to the north. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So, Dana, there's another part to this overall question, and that is the small ports couldn't afford a dredge of their own.
That's right.
So we got together and acquired a dredge that they could share, working together. Now, there's an aspect of all of this. Not only do these small ports have to work together sharing the dredge, there's not enough time in the dredge window to move it through the entire length of the coast. Those of us that represent northern ports agreed to let the southern ports go first, get this dredge, get it operating, get the process in place, and then we'd get a second dredge later on, once the pattern was established, to work the northern parts. I mean, that's a reflection of how the Coastal Caucus works. That sometimes you give up something that may be in your best interest, getting my ports dredged, so that we can get some ports dredged. I hope that there's a theme emerging already this morning, that is that working together, we accomplish more together.
And I just want to say, if you want to know what dredges do, you can go out on the dock in front of the bill, and you can watch a dredge working. That happens to be a clam shovel dredge, so it's dropping down, it's picking up the sand and all the stuff that's filled in the bay, putting it in a barge, and they take it out into the ocean and dump it. And it makes it a deeper bay. And that's what we do on the coast. There are 2 places on the coast, and one of them, this is also a life safety issue. When you get too filled in, if you were at Port Orford a while back, you couldn't get your boat out of the water because it had filled in so much because of where they are that you had to do a clam shovel to dig it out. At the mouth of the Rogue River, it gets so much debris and sand and gravel there that they can't use the dredge. They've got to come in and clam shovel and dig a way through to get into the channel. So if you're trying to get out of that bar and you're one of those times when the sand's up, you get heavy seas and wind and you don't make it out. And sometimes people die. So it is very important to us. The smaller dredge is a little tube. It goes down, it sucks up the sand and sends it to wherever the end of the pipe is so that it gets out of the deal. Sometimes it's nice. You can suck it out and send it out into the middle of the channel where the Corps will take it out. But the issue is how do we find the resources necessary for us to, how do we find enough resources to get the little places where some of our communities depend on the resources that are coming in from rental spaces and other kinds of stuff. You've got to keep those open. That's what our dredging is doing on the coast.
Thank you. Now, we've talked about the fishing. We've talked about the timber, but of course there's always the tourism. And nationwide and in the Seattle-Portland area, we hear that the economy is picking up a little bit. Are we seeing better numbers in tourism, and how is that working to increase the economy?
It's sort of the good news and the bad news. I would dare say the numbers are going up, but for some parts of the North Coast, the traffic gridlock is so intense that the visitor experience is diminished. Representative Boone and I are going to spend next week running back and forth between the Tillamook County Fair and the Astoria Regatta, and the prospect of driving through Seaside is enough to just give you the heebie-jeebies. That is a major freight route, and being able to accommodate the multiple users, I think, speaks to the need for investment in our infrastructure that Representative McCune already spoke to. So there are places in our magnificent state that are in peril of being loved to death. And while the tourists make cash registers ring like church bells in some places, we've got to make sure that they have a positive visitor experience to make them want to come back, which means serviceable roads that are passable at peak hours.
I know that you've already gotten the idea of the responsibility of this group, but I just want to add one more. They're also a filter. For instance, the bill that Senator Robin talked about in these terrible conditions of the lakes, which we want to be pristine for our tourists when they come. And so what the Coastal Caucus sees is sometimes the foolishness of government, where there's money over here that's being spent to increase tourism in our state and to make things livable, and yet when they get here, we haven't spent the money to make the things right when they're here. So this is an important part of what these people do, and it's why they meet at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I will say, we also are trying to work really hard. Representative Gomberg and I are on a group that's working on trying to make Cape Kiwanda a safer place. We've had a number of young people, 18 to 25, who have fallen off the cape there and drowned. I think it's been 7 or 8 during the last 3 or 4 years. And so we've had a work group that's been working on that to try to figure out with parks and others, what can we do to make this place safer? And one of the things that we identified early was there was a great ad that was put out by the state of Oregon on tourism. And it had a person standing out on the rocks out here at our beach as the waves are breaking over, and you're thinking, why would anybody show people out there doing that kind of thing? And so, you know, what we're trying to do is how do we help people, encourage people to come here and do it smart and safely? Because we don't want people riding logs in the surf. We don't want kids climbing these cliffs that are sandstone and then having them fall out from under them and they end up in the water that's cold, and then we risk the lives of first response and all sorts of other people who have been hurt up at Cape Kiwanda over the last number of years, trying to help save other people. And it is important to do the kinds of stuff we do right. And it's really nice to watch what Parks is doing. There are these extreme adventure people who post these pictures on the internet. And we're trying to figure out, can we get a hold of those people and say, this is really dumb. Please don't show people hanging on to a piece of sandstone hanging out over the ocean. Just because you did it doesn't mean the next person that rock is going to still be there. So there's a whole lot of things that have to do with tourism that we love the people coming and visiting. We love them spending their resources in our communities. But at the same time, we want them to go home with a great experience as well. So a lot of issues with respect to tourism.
And there's one more at the risk of breaching another topic that I think begs just a moment of attention. When you have a service-based economy, when tourism is the base, you produce a lot of jobs, but they are not high-paid jobs. And what we're finding on the coast in a lot of our communities is, though we want visitors here, we welcome them here, but we create kind of low-wage jobs, so the people that have those jobs are getting priced out of the economy and can't live in the communities in which they work because housing prices are up. So we're creating a housing issue for a lot of our folks who work in the service industry. And I think it happens up and down the coast. And I know that Mr. Lehman, who represents our local community action organization, is here today and will attest to a fact that we have a housing problem on the coast in our small rural communities, just as we do in our metropolitan areas. And it's something that we're going to have to address at some point.
So 2 other issues very quickly. One of them is in our evolving tourism industry, many of our communities are now dealing with the question of vacation rental dwellings. Vacation rental dwellings, 1,000 of them in Tillamook County, 500 of them in Lincoln City alone. In Lincoln City alone, that creates the potential to bring another 15,000 visitors a day to a community that already boasts more oceanfront hotel rooms than any place else between Seattle and San Francisco. But it also has the effect of impacting neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, with more traffic, more noise, more trash. And so you have that potential conflict, as well as the more significant conflict that as homes are put into nightly rentals, they're taken out of the monthly or annual rental pool, exacerbating our significant housing problem. A big issue that our communities are all dealing with in different ways. the other topic that I wanted to touch on right now is if you talk to small businesses up and down the coast and you ask them the biggest challenge they're facing, some of them may talk about taxes, some will talk about regulation, some will talk about capital for expansion, but all of them are talking about the lack of qualified, motivated, job-ready employees. Finding people to work in the jobs. And we have restaurants in my town that close during the dinner hour because they can't find service people to keep those businesses open and operating. And remember, that's minimum wage plus tips, and we can't find people to work there. That's one of the huge challenges that we face, is finding people for the jobs that we're struggling to create and making sure they're better jobs. My employment department says that the practical minimum wage in Lincoln City right now, Lincoln County, is $11 an hour, because of the competition for people that are available to do the job. So those are two issues that I think really factor into the larger tourism question.
And then when you have jobs that perhaps are seasonal or low wage and a difficulty in finding housing, you can end up with homelessness. Anyone finding any challenges with that in their communities?
Well, I was, and it kind of surprised me too, to find that some of the exactly in the same vein you're talking about, these people will be having 2 and 3 jobs, and they literally have to keep a written, it's a calendar that changes often, and they can't plan too far ahead. I mean, restaurant work, you probably plan a couple weeks or at least a week ahead so they know who's working when, but they don't make enough to get benefits. They don't make enough to pay for child care, et cetera, and so they're ending up making the choice of either living in their car or staying with friends or camping. And there's camp areas, I'll just take Clatsop County, outside of Seaside. That camping area, Circle Creek, is often full of people who are employees at the businesses there, the restaurants, and they're driving all around, and they are getting caught in what Senator Johnson said is that traffic nightmare. It now takes, on a busy day, an hour to go from Cannon Beach to Astoria. And factoring in traffic or, God forbid, a wreck that closes the highway, and especially on 101 or 26 or Highway 30, you can have hours and hours of backup even after the event is over. So I think a lot of and we do have homelessness, and it's not a pretty thing in that sense. People who are working with the public, say you work at a restaurant, where do you take a shower? If you're camping in a campground, that is possible, but some of those people are not. They're camping in the woods, and then there's that, because that brings up the fire danger. So that's more than 13 seconds we'll allow.
Let me describe the problem in a different way. 50% of the residents here at the coast are challenged by the cost of housing. We've got a vacancy rate for rentals of less than 0.5%. 10% of the kids in our schools are technically homeless. 10% of the kids in our schools. Absolutely unacceptable statistics. And that homeless issue then rolls over into issues of crime, of substance abuse, of domestic violence, and on and on and on. The problem of finding housing for people that want to work here, live here, and enjoy our coast continues, and we need to find a way to address that if our economy is going to thrive.
I'd agree. That sounds like it's one of the primary fundamental issues.
If I could, the one part of that we continue to ignore is the fact that state and local fees and regulations have made it very difficult for people to choose to build housing. And it's worse in the metro area than it is other places, but you have to spend a hell of a lot of money before you can even turn a spade into the ground. And we need to look at, if we want affordable housing, we need to make the process of building homes affordable from the government level as well.
And we are coming to the end of our time. We've had a wonderful discussion. I think we've hit many of the topics and found them to be fair and balanced. So let's close on a positive. I know I love to come to the Oregon coast with my daughters, and we've driven every speck of it and had some of the finest memories that we will have in our lifetime out here with you, and we're grateful for that. So maybe a few of you could just tell me some of your favorite places and things that the coast has to offer as we conclude.
great libations and comestibles. We have a robust hospitality industry with some of the best food, and now with craft breweries and craft distilleries, artisan-created comestibles and libation.
We have a great Marine Life Center, new in Charleston. Of course, you're familiar with the work that the University of Oregon does. Each summer, we have young people come from all over the world, and this Marine Life Center is a part of the result of all of that work. So do visit Charleston and see the new center. You will thoroughly enjoy it.
And I would say, as a family growing up on the coast, we have the best parks in the world. There's no place else in the world to go to those places. And for me, one of those favorite places has always been Honeyman Park, just south of Florence, because it has this wonderful lake for the kids to play in. You can go out in the dunes and do things out in the dunes and go to the ocean, and then walk across the street and be in the forest and another lake. So taking advantage of those kinds of things. I have a daughter now who's a playwright in New York, and the one thing she talks about is the place she grew up. I mean, it is a special place. And when you choose to go to a beach in Oregon, you aren't there with 100,000 other people who had the same idea. Some of the times you can be there all by yourself, which is really amazing. And so taking advantage of the place we live in, that's why so many of the people live here. We love it here, and we want to live here. And we want to keep those special places for memories for other kids for the rest of their lives. So we hope that people take advantage of those. I agree with Senator Verger. Going out to Charleston, the Marine Life Center is an amazing thing. We've got a new history museum we heard about some people talking about earlier. Come look at what we have here. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow, I don't even know where to start. All of that. If you have a chance, some morning, relatively early, go across the McCullough Bridge, hang a left, go out to Horsefall Beach, park in the parking lot, and go walk on the beach. I can take my dogs out there at 7:30 in the morning and walk 3-4 miles and not see another soul. Where else in the world can you do that? Go catch a fish. Go catch a crab. Go walk in the woods. Go walk on the boardwalk. Go to the museum, whether it's in Newport or Astoria or down in Brookings or Port Orford. This is truly an amazing place. Never too hot, never too cold, don't need a lot of clothes. And it's just...
I'm not gonna
I didn't mean it that way.
No wonder we like it
You don't
here.
need boots and a jacket most of the time. We have kids in our high school that have attended 4 years of high school in a pair of shorts. Because we have a moderate climate, and that's what draws a lot of people here to retire, because it's very temperate and moderate. And we have a lot of quirky, wonderful people here, and I just come take full advantage of it.
Probably my two favorite places on the planet. One is Crater Lake, and the other is the Oregon coast. And I defy anybody to be at either place and deny the existence of God, because you can't do it. Okay, pure and simple. Now, what the coast has over Crater Lake is Crater Lake doesn't have bottom fish. So, well, yeah, once there may be fish at the bottom of Crater Lake, but I'm not sure they compare to the bottom fish here on the coast. So, to a degree, it's spiritual for me, but then there's also the food aspect of it as well.
Because he grows it.
A couple of things. I don't know how old your girls are, but high school. Okay, hiking Saddle Mountain and all the other beautiful hikes in the woods and along the logging roads that you're allowed to go on. And my personal favorite is the Tillamook Cheese Factory. It's always a great spot. You can have breakfast, lunch, dinner there, and great ice cream, and try some of their new flavors. I'm still trying to get him to do lingonberry, but it's been a test. It'll come.
Well, I would say to Representative McEwen that in Oregon, on the coast in the summer, we strip down to just one sweatshirt. But we live in a remarkable state, and those of us in the Coastal Caucus, I think, represent the very best part of it. There's a reason that the rest of Oregon vacations here and wants to retire here. And, of course, it's the natural beauty, the opportunity to interact with nature, the history, and the just plain fun that you can have on the beach. But I think another part of that is the affordability of the coast compared to coastlines in so many other parts of the country. And you can come here and spend very little and have that special coastal experience. I would be remiss if I didn't say it was a great place to fly a kite.
Yay.
And I would say to my good friend Representative Boone that she has the creamery, but my district has all the cows.
That's right.
Okay, when do you go out and do these things that you're talking about? Anyway, I would hope that people take time to actually experience the scenic and wild portion of the Rogue. It's different than any place that I have been. And even though I've been down there now, 52 years, I just went up there a while back for a day, and a jet boat, had a meal up there, and it is a great and unique experience.
Well, thank you so much. We are out of time. I appreciate this. I know I could talk for a very long time. This has been a fabulous discussion, and I thank you for your participation. I thank you for all of you who have come, and to the special crew at Charter. We thank you for watching at home. I'm Dana Cowley, and this is Charter Local Edition Northwest.